안녕하세요. Good. Good morning, everyone. It's really good to be here this morning. Thank you, Mr. Overstreet, for having me here. I pass by Andrews Academy every morning and afternoon, but it's my first time to come to this area. It's quite big. I've been to the gym to watch some games. Mr. Overstreet asked me to talk about Korea, so I'll do that a little bit. I'm sure you already know quite a bit about Korea through Sai, but that's not really the accurate picture of Korea. What he portrays in his song is actually only a part of the posh, street, the district. But Korea is a beautiful country. The culture, I think, is beautiful. I was 22 years old when I first came to the United States. I came here to learn English. I loved the language and I wanted to learn it, and I said, I want to go and learn it. And the first place I went to was not California or Florida, but it was a small town in the middle of nowhere called Lincoln. Do you know where that is? Yes, it's in Nebraska. You will say, why there? Not Andrews, not Loma-Linda. Why did you go to Lincoln? I know most people don't go to Lincoln to learn English. There's cornfield. I went there because there was an Adventist university, and also I chose that school because I heard that there were not very many Koreans. So I thought, well, if there are no Koreans, I will be forced to speak English all the time. So I spent a year and a half there learning English, actually, taking classes. And, I spoke like a little baby at first. Whenever I saw a 3-year-old speaking better than me, I'm like, how, can they speak so well? You probably know that feeling, those of you who are from Korea. And I'd like you to have some sympathy for foreign students, when they struggle with their English, because it's very difficult to learn a foreign language as an adult. For Korean students to learn English, it's almost like, for a right-handed person to try to become a left-handed person. Do you know how difficult it is? Let me explain. The Korean language and the English language have nothing in common. The sentence structure is completely different. For example, if you want to say, I know someone, I have a friend who can speak Korean. How do you put that into a sentence in Korean? I'm not teaching you Korean. It'll take forever. But just to tell you how the sentence is different, you will say, you will first say I, and that's the only thing that is common. And then you will put Korean. So I Korean, instead of can speak, you will say speak can. See? And then you say friend have. Okay? So you'll say I Koreans speak can friend have. Okay? So imagine yourself going to Korea, trying to communicate with Korean people using that kind of structure. Wouldn't that be very challenging? And the pronunciation, alphabet, they are totally different. I will tell you about a funny experience that happened to me. It's funny now, but it was very, very embarrassing. I was teaching 8th graders middle school. In middle school, I was teaching language arts. You know how mean 8th graders are? I have one at home. And, I was telling my students to take out their worksheet. And in Korean, we don't distinguish the long vowel like sheet and the short one. Like sheep and ship, We don't, because we only have one sound. And I thought I said it, correctly, and then it just didn't come out correctly. And you can imagine how the mean 8th graders responded to me. I will never forget that experience. So, in the Korean language, the teacher making that kind of mistake in the classroom, and then the Korean language, we always put a vowel after the consonant. So instead of saying Andrews, we'll say Andrews. So the church right here is called Andrews Korean Church, not Andrews Korean Church, because we always have to put a vowel right after the consonant. So when you hear some, does that mean I have to? Okay, all right. I know how that feels, so you don't have to go to class right away, right? Anyway, I was talking about the language. Now, it's not just the language that is different. It is the culture. When I first came to America, I had an American roommate, and I thought she was a very nice girl. One day, she was eating something in the room, and I thought that she would offer some to me because in our culture, we always offer first, Would you like some? And I waited. And, not that I wanted the food, because you never eat by yourself, but just she and, myself in the room, and she was eating, and she finished the whole thing without asking me once. So I was very offended, I thought she was mean, or she didn't like me. And later I found out that Americans generally don't offer food when you eat, right? So that was a shock. Another time, my teacher called me using a crooked index finger. Come here. You know how insulting that was? Because in Korea, we do that only to the dogs. Okay? We do not use an index finger to call somebody. It is not used for human beings. So when I saw that, I thought the teacher was very mean. And I didn't know it was okay in America to do that. So without this, cultural understandings, you can easily have negative opinions about people. My roommate is mean. She's really mean. Or my teacher, she's very, she's not a good person. But, when I learned those differences, I came to understand, I often hear stories of teachers in America who get upset when the Asian children don't look the teachers directly in the eye when the teachers are talking. They're looking at, they're somewhere else or down or sideways, It's not because they're rude or they're not listening, because in Korean culture, it is rude to look directly in the eye when adults are talking because, it seems like you're, about to argue. So children will always look a little down, a little sideways, because you're not really supposed to look directly in their eyes. But, if the teacher does not understand that, the teacher may think the kid is rude. He's not or she's not respectful, okay? So, we need to have some understanding. One time my teacher wrote my name in red ink. You know how shocking that was. How in the composition class, Eunyoung, you have to do this. And my name was in red, and I'm like, you never write somebody's name in Korean in red unless a person is dead. See, there are many differences that I had to learn, And have you noticed that, some Asian people make some slurping noises when they eat something hot? Or sometimes they talk with their mouth full. Or even share from a common dish when they eat. What was your initial reaction when you saw those things? Did you think how uncouth or uncivilized they are? Well, let me explain. Okay. In the Asian culture, making slurping noises is completely okay because it shows you're very satisfied, and it can be a compliment to the cook. So the cook will think that, my food was good. So that's how we show how much we liked, how much you appreciate the food. And when people talk, share from the common bowl, and then talk with their mouth full, the Korean society is very intact, saving face. They don't care about those between close friends. Korean people always use our school, not my school, our house instead of my house when they express, It is because they always value cooperation, solidarity, rather than individualism. So the language reflects the culture. And when you understand that, you do not judge people saying, that's uncouth, And when people call, they will always socialize first. I was very shocked when I was attending Andrews University. I went to see my advisor. The first thing that she said was, "What's up?" She didn't ask me how I was doing, how my feelings were that day. People don't talk about that in America, but in Korean culture, we always care about people first. How are you today? Have you eaten? How are you feeling? Is your school going okay? And then we'll get to the business, okay? And I've noticed that American people sometimes say, "Oh, let's get together sometime. I'll give you a call." And it never happens. But Korean people will never say those things unless they really mean it. And American people always ask you, "How are you?" And they just go by. And, and Koreans will never ask, "How are you?" unless they are really interested in knowing how you are doing. And Korean people are known to be very polite. I'm sure you have noticed that. It might have been changing, but at least when I was going to school, Korean kids are very polite. The teachers are respected. We always hand things to the teacher with both hands. If you hand your teacher something in one hand, it's rude. Okay, you're not supposed to hand an adult something. You have to use both hands. I remember when I was in Korea in elementary school, middle school, on field trip days, my mom would pack 2 lunches, one for me and one for my teacher. That's how we show respect to the teacher. So the teacher ends up having lots of lunches because all my friends also brought lunch for the teacher. I know it's redundant, it's a waste of food, but that's how we show our teachers that we really respect. And have you noticed that Korean people always bow? Yeah, when they greet, because that's how they show respect as well. I gave you these examples today not to indicate which culture is superior or inferior. It is because I think it is very important for us to increase our understanding of different cultures and respect the differences instead of judging. Their cultures are weird. For those of you who have never been to another country to study, I think it's most of you probably, it'll be very hard for you to understand the challenges that the foreign students face each day in the classroom, in the gym, and every day, in their life. How do you usually respond when you see fobs? I'm one of them who speak English with funny accent, eat foods that look weird or smell nasty, or can participate in sports as well. How many of you have actually made an effort to go out of your way to show friendly interest and kindness? I think God loves variety. When you look at the nature, God's creation testifies to His love, for variety and diversity. And we all talk differently and do things in different ways and eat things. They're very different. But I think it is God's will that we all understand each other, accept and respect, differences. Jesus said when He comes. Do you remember the parable of the sheep, not sheep, the sheep and the goats? Okay, in Matthew chapter 25, how He will divide the people into groups. And He will take one group to heaven and the other will be left. He didn't say, "I will ask, were you born into an Adventist family?" No, it's not in the Bible. He will not say, "Are you vegetarian?" No. He said, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then you will say, "God, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you?" when did we take you sick in prison and go visit you? And you know what Jesus will say? Whatever you did for the lonely, tongue-tied, awkward 14 student at Andrews Academy, you did for me.